One of the biggest issues facing the United States today, and one of the most talked about problems in the political arena, is that of the death penalty or capital punishment. In the United States, we execute a larger number of convicts and inmates than any other first world country. In fact, most first world countries and other Western nations don't even allow the death penalty. Countries like England don't have a death penalty, and most Scandinavian nations don't even allow life sentences for most crimes. The death penalty is a serious issue in the United States for a large number of reasons, and it needs to be abolished, and I'll explain why. One of the biggest issues, according to the New York Times, is that in an article published in January of 2021, one of the biggest issues is that many inmates on death row and a large number of inmates that have been executed over the years have actually been innocent for the most part. In fact, 18 people last year were exonerated from death row with DNA evidence and proven innocent, people that were slated to be executed and would have been had it not been for last second DNA evidence. There's also an article about from the Boston Globe published in September of 2020. The majority of death row inmates are actually people of color and races that are not Caucasian. And it's been discussed and it's proven that the death penalty has severe racial injustice behind it. These are just a couple of the serious issues that are coming from the death penalty. It's not just how inhumane it is, there's serious social repercussions to having a death penalty. Two of the major problems with the death penalty too are, for one, as an article by the New York Post in July of 2020 discusses, it's actually bound by law federally. So for certain crimes, they have to sentence the individual to the death penalty. There's no other option for it by the rule of law. You can not sentence, certain crimes require that you give them the death penalty. That's federal constitutional law in the United States. Even if it's not state law, if the case is brought before a federal court, then they're obligated to sentence them to death. And that's one of the issues with it, is the law needs to be edited to get rid of the death penalty, because in its current state, it's mandatory. Another issue that the OC Register brings up, and from an article in October of 2016, is that the death penalty just simply isn't efficient. It's not economic, it's not humane, it's not cost analysis, because these individuals who are sentenced to death, they're not executed outright. Most of these people are on death row for 10, 15 years before they're executed, because they have the right first days of execution and things like that make it a very elongated process. It's a seriously lengthy issue. And it's very expensive to maintain this, especially on death row, where it's a lot stricter control than a normal justice facility. So those are two of the major issues. Now, two of the big causes for why these issues are occurring, why the death penalty has been so troublesome, is the popular demand for it is beginning to shift, and there needs to be new options. These are two of the bigger causations for this necessity to abolish it. According to an article from the Chicago Tribune in May of 2021, 60% of Americans, 60%, are in favor of abolishing the death penalty completely, and only 28% of Americans even support it wholeheartedly. This is one of the big causes for why we need to abolish the death penalty, and one of the main reasons. We are a democracy. We follow the will of the people, and the majority are saying get rid of the death penalty. It does not matter what federal law at that point states. What matters is the populace and the masses are beginning to turn in favor of abolishing it, and they need to be heard and they need to be listened to, because that is what a democracy does. And another article from the LA Times, and published in December of 2015, there just needs to be a discussion for new options. A lot of the options that have been presented are too partisan to be agreed upon. One is too progressive and too liberal, one is too conservative and too stuck in the old ways. There needs to be bipartisan, unanimous agreement for a alternative solution to the death penalty. We don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. It needs to be discussed. There needs to be discussions, and models have to be made, and It has to be something talked about, but it isn't talked about thoroughly enough. And in the 2016 election, it was never talked about, and in the 2021 election, or the 2020 election, it was never even an issue brought up in most talking points. It hasn't been discussed in almost a decade. And this is one of the big issues with it, is that it needs to be talked about more. So a couple of solutions for this problem. In an article from the Wall Street Journal published in February 2015, they say that we need to follow the will of the populace, and that the majority of the world has already moved away from the death penalty. But in America specifically, our population is beginning to become more progressive, and as that happens, they are weaning off the death penalty. This means the death penalty has to be removed completely, or at that point it's no longer a democratic principle. It doesn't matter if it's a rule of law if democracy doesn't agree on it. And so there needs to be a new solution. There needs to be something that can be discussed, and there needs to be something that is chosen by the masses as the new system, since this one is no longer working. So what I ask of you is it worth it to have an individual that is absolutely guilty put to death if 10 other innocent people are put to death before them because we got it wrong? Is it fair even to have that individual who is guilty put to death? Is that humane? Is that not a violation of the right to life highlighted in our Constitution? These are significant questions that have to be asked, and you have to think about these when thinking about the death penalty. So I implore you to consider voting against the death penalty and voting to abolish the death penalty, and not only state-held elections, but in a federal sense as well.